right? So everyone is familiar with the official version of how Elon Musk came up with the idea for the Boring Company while he was delayed in traffic in California and decided to create a tunnel boring machine and really just start drilling. It's a decent tale. It almost seems like the ideal cover narrative for creating a secret technology that is concealed in plain sight since it is relevant, memorable, and mildly humorous. But what if I tell you that Elon Musk actually founded the Boring Company in order to create his own subterranean Martian metropolis on Mars using a new generation of tunnel boring technology? Quite impressed? Sure, reasonably fine. It isn't exactly a revolutionary discovery or even a noteworthy stretch of the imaginative mind could reach. Elon is likely to attempt to launch a few of these boring machines into space at such a point as most people would likely expect. It is obvious. Unfortunately, this topic doesn't receive more attention as a serious conversation since it's fascinating to consider the connection between what is occurring now beneath the roads of Las Vegas and what may one day be the first human colony on an extraterrestrial planet. Therefore, let's discuss the boring passageways on Mars. Welcome, and you are watching Technology Zone, where the home of technology resides. Join us as we discover the features and other aspects of Elon Musk's plan for Mars in this video. We may start by discussing the initial motivation for digging tunnels on Mars. After all, we are all going to live in beautiful sci-fi bubble caps, correct? Maybe not as much, although it appears fantastic in drawings, the gigantic domes seem to be the worst design choice. The reality of living on Mars would require considerable protection against the elements. It includes exposure to radiation, micrometeorites, the atmosphere, and dust storms. The first time an 8-kilometer high storm of electrostatic dust passes through, what will happen to that enormous dome? Who will clean it up? And not only that, but for Martian communities to last for a long time, this radiation will be a significant worry. Here on the surface of Mars, radiation exposure from the sun is around 40 to 50 times more than on the Earth's surface. This is due to the lack of a magnetosphere on Mars, which would typically deflect solar winds and cosmic rays. Really, Mars does not have much of an atmosphere, and because of this, we are more exposed to meteorites when we are on the red planet. This is what differentiates Earth from this planet, because as a result of the Earth's extremely dense atmosphere, when meteorites strike it at speeds of up to 72 kilometers per second, the high heat produced by friction drives the material to burn up long before it reaches the ground. Even if something actually gets through, it will be much smaller on strike than it was in space. Less than 1% of our atmospheric pressure on Earth's atmosphere exists on Mars. Therefore, when it strikes our dome, the meteorite will still be traveling at a speed of around 72 kilometers per second. That won't work out well, and the human body will have much more difficulty adjusting to the low-pressure environment. Our blood will heat up, and our eyes would burst if there were a break in the ecosystem and a depressurization. Elon Musk is fully aware that moving to a subterranean area would be a terrific method to address some of the major problems the Earth presents to us. In a video interview at a conference in 2017, Elon said this when asked how the tunnel boring concept would connect to his ambitions for a Mars colony. He said, quote, "I do believe being proficient at digging tunnels may be incredibly useful for Mars. If you chose to, you could construct an entire city underground by creating dwellings underground with effective radiation shielding. People might occasionally still want to venture outside, but with the correct boring technology on Mars, you could build a huge amount underneath. I do believe there is a great deal of overlap in that area," end quote. Elon also suggested that although there would be a sizable technological overlap, a Mars-based boring machine would require a different optimization than an Earth-based boring machine. Elon also predicted that there would be a lot of ice mining on Mars and a lot of other mining activities for which these boring machines can be used for. "We are very confident that the surface of Mars will be abundant in metals like chromium, copper, nickel, and iron. These materials will be essential for what is known as in situ resources, which refers to exploiting the planet's natural resources to maintaining the colony. Since there is probably a lot of ice on Mars' surface, mining water will play a significant role here. There should be enough there to maintain a tiny colony. It won't be just like the film Total Recall, where people pretend that the whole core of Mars is formed of ice." Now let us start making connections together. The boring firm was founded in 2016, the same year that SpaceX published its initial conceptual designs for an interplanetary transportation system. This would later develop into the Starship. Therefore, we might assume that Elon was seriously considering a Mars landing during this specific year. He's really quite brilliant, to be honest. Elon Musk recently disclosed that he is developing the third edition of his big plan to give a cohesive vision of his three firms: Tesla, SpaceX, and the Boring Company. The first Boring Company tunnel was ever built below the SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Check this one out if that isn't enough. They will fit together like a glove since the proof rock boring machine's diameter is 8 meters and the cargo covering on the SpaceX spacecraft is 9 meters. We could tunnel on Mars at a very snail-like speed of 17 meters per hour if we let loose one of these monsters, almost as if it were done intentionally. In little time at all, we'd have a metropolis below ground. As there is a need for us to establish an artificial vacuum within the tube to account for wind resistance while building a hyperloop on Earth, boring transit tunnels beneath the surface of Mars would make it possible to develop ultra-high-speed hyperloop systems quickly. However, the atmosphere on Mars is now almost completely vacuumed. Therefore, a vehicle might pass through the loop with practically little resistance by merely allowing ambient pressure to do so. We might even build an artificial gravity condition that would mimic the circumstances on Earth by constructing a massive circular tube that contained a mobile habitat that was constantly rotating, much like a centrifuge. We would be able to counteract the weakening consequences of the low Martian gravity by spending time inside the centrifuge. There is, of course, one major obstacle to that hypothesis, which is weight. Consequently, a spaceship can impressively carry 100 metric tons of goods to the surface of the red planet. However, according to some studies, the proof rock boring machine will weigh roughly 1,200 metric tons. That doesn't make sense either. If Elon Musk were really to create his fleet of 1,000 starships, it would take 12 spacecraft to transport one boring machine, which is not as efficient as we'd like to think, but it is not impossible. Even while I adore the hypothesis, we must be realistic and somewhat contradict it. But anyway, what if I tell you that because Mars is already covered with natural tunnels, we wouldn't even need boring machinery there? It turns out that Mars itself has already done an enormous amount of the tough work for us, which is sort of mind-blowing. According to scientists, they found lava tubes, and these lava tubes, which are rock formations, are abundant on the surface of Mars. These are remnants from the past when Mars and Earth both experienced volcanic activity. Our two planets likely resembled each other greatly at some point in the last 4 billion years when they were both likely living creatures with active molten cores of rock and metal. The highest peak in the solar system is the gigantic Olympus Mons here on the surface of Mars. That is a Martian volcano's crater, which is more than 2.5 times higher than Everest. However, Mars began to cool far more quickly than Earth. The core of Mars hardened, maybe because it is smaller or because it is farther from the sun. The atmosphere was swept away mainly by the solar wind when the magnetic field vanished. But what the old lava flows did leave behind were these massive tunnels carved into the rock surface. Because we have seen the skylights and the tunnel ceilings during our satellite flybys, we are certain that these tubes are there on Mars. These are the places where the lava tube ceiling collapses, exposing the hollow cavern below through a perfectly spherical hole in the surface. Additionally, on Mars, there are a ton of these skylights. They are also on the Moon, which indicates that a network of tunnels already exists and is only waiting to be discovered. These lava tubes will be far broader than those that we observe forming on the Earth because of the low gravity on Mars. They might be kilometers long and hundreds of meters wide. These tunnels' roofs may be up to 90 meters deep, giving us more than ample protection from radiation, meteorites, and other potential threats the solar system may provide. These cave tubes' insulating properties should keep the temperature consistently below 20 degrees Celsius. And since we anticipate that perhaps the rock that composes Mars' outer surface would be impermeable, we should eventually be able to pressurize the caverns with an artificial atmosphere. So while it would be frigid, we would be able to breathe without helmets, and our eyeballs wouldn't burst. Additionally, the interiors of these tubes may contain the relics of previous life on Mars. There might be preserved fossils of microbes, or perhaps fish, reptiles, or other creatures underneath the surface of the planet. But it's also possible that almost all the evidence has now been blown away from the surface or covered by hundreds of millions of years' worth of dust storms. Perhaps there was a civilization of some form of animal living on Mars when the planet started to perish, and in a last-ditch attempt to survive, they withdrew underground. There could be some strange things down there too. I can see what you're thinking. Does this completely rule out the concept of the Boring Company in space? No, but having tunnel boring equipment operating on Mars would still be wonderful and very helpful. Perhaps we can connect the natural tubes with our own subnetwork of tunnels and hyperloops, using them as our infrastructure's primary communities and main thoroughfares. That's arguably the best possible circumstance for a Martian metropolis, all things considered, like underground hubs that are connected by their own transit system. Also, we can live in the caverns and use the surface as a resource, a location for solar energy harvesting, the construction of greenhouses, and the cultivation of food. Consider it maybe as a seaside town on Earth. We labor on the water and live on the land, but the water is the top of an alien planet, and the land is a cavern. It's incredible that we live in a time of human history in which we can have any kind of meaningful conversation about matters like these. It's mind-blowing that this thing is even somewhat feasible. At this point, I'm sure we can all recall a time when we tried to get a piece of technology but couldn't do so. How can we make Elon Musk's dream of a Martian community that can support itself a reality? Do you believe that the Boring Company may hold the solution to everything? Let's discuss it in the comment box below. What technology do you think would be the next one to be on the lead? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more weekly stuff like this, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And again, this is Technology Zone. See you guys in the next one.